This is a funeral ceremony. Bura Mama died a month back. He was a very generous person, amiable person, charitable person. He founded school. This school has arranged this funeral ceremony. A lot of elites have come. The parliament member Abu Said Chad was also supposed to come. As he was busy, he sent his son here. A lot of local elites are there, school students, teachers, college teachers, all the elite people are here. And side by side, there are also rural rustic people. They remember Bura Mama in a very special way, in a respectful way. He was such a great man. When he went up to death, everybody becomes equal. But how can you forget the memory? How can you forget the camera that you have in your eyes, in your brain, all the memories stored? My brother, elder brother, Hamid Rahman, he had been a great, actually, friend of his, and he mixed with all kinds of people. He was a charitable person. He donated. He became the founder of the school. You can imagine, and he is from a great descent. His family members are great. So as I remember, they were 6 brothers and sisters. He did not live here that much. He, after the marriage, started living in Rajshahi city. There he also has great daughters. I heard that his elder daughter is supposed to become a university teacher, but somehow she slipped. The younger daughter, I don't know, but I have heard that she's also very meritorious. So Bura Mama was so much erect, so much stout, so much healthy. But you understand, cancer is a serious disease. Because of cancer, he had been suffering from, made his life hell. And after suffering for a long period of time, he died at last peacefully. And today you see the funeral is going on. So we all pray for him, for the departed soul, so that he rests in peace and he is happy in the grave and in the hereafter as well. So many people all said very much good of him, all eulogized him. When I talked to him, why are you losing so much weight? At the time there was a suspicion that a cancer somebody suffers from gives some signs, and the most important signs that if somebody loses the health, loses muscle, body mass unnecessarily, rapidly, then there's a great sign of cancer. And that happened to him. As somebody, everybody, all of us will die still, and we become equal to all. Still, we have memory, full of good memory with him. And now I remember this story, the poem by Thomas Gray. It's an elegy written in a country churchyard. It is a sad and thoughtful poem about death, simple people, and forgotten lives. The poem begins in the evening. The day is ending. The sun is going down. The village becomes quiet. The speaker stands in a country churchyard. He looks at the graves of poor village people. These people were not rich. They were not famous. They lived simple lives. They worked in the fields. They loved their families. They had hopes, feelings, and dreams. But now they're dead. Everything is silent. The poem tells us that death comes to everyone. Rich people die. Poor people die. Powerful people die. Ordinary people also die. Death makes all people equal. Gray also says that poor people should not be looked down on. Even if they had no fame, their life still had value. Their love was real. Their pain was real. Their hard work was real. One important idea in the poem is hidden talent. Gray says some of these poor villagers may have had great ability. One could have become a great poet. One could have become a great leader. But because they were poor, they never got the chance. They had no education and no big opportunity. So their talent stayed unseen. This part of the poem is very touching. It shows that the world loses many great people because society does not give everyone the same chance. But Gray also shows another side. These simple villagers were far from pride, greed, and cruelty. They did not become corrupt. They lived quiet and humble lives, so their simple life also had peace and honesty. Later, the speaker starts thinking about his own death. He imagines that one day he too will die and be buried. He wonders what people will say about him after he's gone. At the end, the poem becomes very personal and emotional too. Gray shows that every human being wants kindness, mercy, and a little memory after death. So the main message of the poem is clear. Human life is short. Death comes to all. Poor people also have dignity. Many great talents stay hidden because of poverty. And every life, even a simple life, has meaning. This is why the poem is still important today. It reminds us to respect ordinary people and to remember that behind every grave there was once a living heart. Right now I remember another poem by John Donne. John Donne's poem named Death Be Not Proud. It's a strong and fearless poem about death. In this poem, the poet speaks directly to death. He talks to death as if it is a person, but he does not speak with fear. He speaks with confidence. He challenges death. He even insults death. This makes the poem powerful from the beginning. The poem starts with the words, "Death, be not proud." Here, John Donne tells death not to feel too great or too powerful. Many people think death is mighty and terrible. Many people fear death. But Donne says death is not as strong as people think. He says death should not be proud because it cannot truly defeat the human soul. This is the central idea of the poem. Death may seem powerful, but in truth, it is weak. It may destroy the body, but it cannot destroy the soul. For Donne, death is not the end. It is only a short stage. It is only a passage from this world to eternal life. In the poem, Donne says that some people call death powerful and dreadful, but he says this is false. Death does not really kill him. Death cannot win over him in the final sense. The body may stop living, but the soul lives on. The death cannot claim complete victory. Then Donne compares death to sleep and rest. He says sleep and rest are only images of death. When people sleep, they get peace and comfort. Sleep gives rest to the body. If sleep, which is like death, is pleasant, then death itself should also bring peace. This is Donne's argument. He tries to show that death is not something horrible. It can be like rest after tiredness. He also says that the best people often go to death early. Good people die, but that does not mean they are defeated. Their souls are freed from the body. Their bones get rest. Their souls move towards something better. So death is not a cruel end for them. It becomes a release. Another important part of the poem is when Donne says that death is not free or independent. Death does not act by its own power. It is controlled by chance. Kings, desperate men, war, sickness, and poison. This means death is not some great ruler. It is actually a servant. It works under many forces. People die in many ways, and death only follows those causes. So death is not proud and powerful. It is low and dependent. Donne then lowers death even more. He says that things like poppy and charms can make people sleep just as well as death can. In simple words, medicine or drugs can create sleep and rest too. So why should death think itself special? Why should death feel proud when even simple things can do something similar? The most famous and powerful idea comes at the end of the poem. Donne says that after one short sleep, we wake eternally. This means after death, believers rise into eternal life. There will be no more death, and after that, eternal life will continue forever. Even Donne gives his final blow to death with the line that death itself shall die. This is a shocking and memorable idea. Death seems to end human life, but in the end, death itself will be destroyed. So the poem turns the usual idea upside down. Normally people fear death. They think death is the final master, but Donne says shows no, death is not master. Death is weak. Death is temporary. Death is only a door. The soul is greater than death. Eternal life is greater than death. In the end, death loses. The tone of the poem is bold, direct, and argumentative. Donne writes as if he is standing in front of death and speaking face to face. He does not cry. He does not beg. He attacks. He uses logic, faith, and strong confidence. This gives the poem energy and strength. This poem is also deeply religious. John Donne was a Christian poet, and his faith shapes the whole poem. Without this religious belief, the poem would sound different. His courage comes from the idea that death is not the end of human existence, because he believes in the immortal soul and eternal life. He can speak against death without fear. At the same time, the poem also speaks to human fear. Most people are afraid of death. They think of it as dark, painful, and final. Donne understands this fear, but he fights against it. He tries to teach the reader not to go down before death. He wants the reader to see death in a new way. In simple words, the poem says this: death looks powerful, but it is not. It is only like sleep. It gives rest to the body. It cannot kill the soul. It does not act alone. It serves other forces. And after death comes eternal life. So finally, death itself is defeated. That is why Death Be Not Proud is such a great poem. It is short, full of strength. It gives courage. It gives hope. It tells human beings not to fear death too much. It says that truth, faith, and eternal life are greater than death. So the detailed summary of the poem is this: John Donne directly challenges death and tells it not to be proud. It argues that death is not truly strong because it cannot destroy the soul. It compares death is to sleep and rest. He says good people do not lose by dying. He explains that death is only a servant of other forces like war, sickness, and chance. Finally, he says that after a short sleep of death, humans rise into eternal life. Then death itself will die. This makes the poem a powerful message of courage, faith, and victory over fear. Yet another poem I remember, Percy Bysshe Shelley's poem Ozymandias. It is one of the most powerful short poems in English literature. It is short, but its meaning is very deep. The poem is mainly about pride, power, time, and destruction. It shows that human greatness does not last forever. No matter how strong a ruler may seem, time can break everything. The poem begins in an interesting way. The speaker says that he met a traveler from an ancient land. This traveler tells him about a broken statue in the desert. So the poem comes to us through a chain. First there is the ancient king, then there is the ruined statue. Then the traveler sees it, then the speaker tells us about it. This makes the poem feel distant and mysterious. It is like a voice coming from the past. The traveler describes the statue in the desert. Two huge lakes of stone are still standing, but the rest of the statue is broken. Nearby, the face lies itself buried in the sand. This image is very striking. Once the statue was made to show greatness and power. It was probably built to impress people and make them fear the king. But now it is destroyed. Only broken pieces remain. This immediately tells us one major idea of the poem. Human pride does not last. Then the traveler describes the face of the statue. The face has a frown. It has wrinkled lips. It has a cold and commanding expression. This tells us a lot about Ozymandias. He was proud. He was arrogant. He wanted to rule others with force and authority. He was not a gentle or humble king. His face still shows his personality even after the statue has broken. Shelley then adds something very important. He says that the sculptor understood these emotions well. The sculptor saw the king's pride and cruelty and carved them into stone. Even though the king is gone, his expression still survives in the art. This is a powerful part of the poem. It shows that art can preserve a person's character. The hand of the sculptor copied the king's feelings so clearly that every centuries later people can still see them. There is also a deep irony here. The kind. The king wanted the statue to glorify himself. He wanted people to remember his greatness. But what remains most clearly is not his success. What remains is his pride and harshness. In a way, the artist has defeated the king. The king wanted praise. Instead, history remembers his arrogance. Then we come to the words written on the statue. They say, "My name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look on my works, you mighty and despair." These words are full of pride. Ozymandias is boasting. He believes he is greater than all other rulers. He tells powerful people to look at his works and lose hope because they can never match him. At the time, these words must have sounded grand and terrifying. They were meant to show his absolute power. But this is the most ironic part of the whole poem. After these proud words, Shelley shows us the real condition of the place. Around the statue, there is nothing. No palace, no army, no city, no sign of the great empire. Only mighty desert stretches far away. The mighty works of Ozymandias are gone. The king's message remains, but reality has destroyed it. This contrast between the proud words and the empty desert gives the poem its greatest power. So the central idea of the poem is very clear. Human power is temporary. Kings, rulers, and empires may seem strong, but they cannot defeat time. They cannot stop decay. They cannot remain forever. Time destroys monuments. State nature covers history. Sand buries pride. In the end, even the greatest rulers become dust and memory. The poem also speaks against arrogance. Ozymandias thought he was greater than everyone else. He believed his power would last forever, but now his statue is broken and his empire has disappeared. Shelley is warning us not to be too proud. Pride may look strong for a moment, but time can humble every human being. Another important idea in the poem is the power of art. The king is gone, his empire is gone, but the sculptor's work still remains, at least partly. The page still shows the king's emotions. The artist understood him and captured him in stone. So in one sense, art lasts longer than political power. The ruler wanted immortality through empire, but he survives mainly through a work of art and through poetry. This makes Shelley's own poem very meaningful too. The statue is broken, but Shelley's poem keeps the story alive. The king wanted to be remembered through stone. Instead, he is remembered through literature. This is another quite irony in the poem. Poetry has become stronger than the king's monument. The setting of the poem is also important. The statue stands in a desert, in a place of emptiness and silence. The desert makes the scene feel lonely and endless. It also makes the fall of the king look even greater. Once there may have been noise, people, buildings, and royal glory. Now there is only silence and sand. The emptiness around the statue makes the king's failure more powerful. The tone of the poem is calm but sharp. Shelley doesn't shout. He doesn't openly attack kings in an emotional way. Instead, he lets the image speak. He simply shows us the broken statue and the empty desert. That is enough. The reader understands the message without long explanation. This quiet method makes the poem even stronger. In simple words, Ozymandias is a poem about a proud king who believed he was all-powerful. He built a great statue to show his strength and glory, but after many years, the statue is broken and his empire has vanished. Only ruins remain in the desert. Through this image, Shelley teaches that power does not last, pride is foolish, and time destroys all human greatness. That is why Ozymandias is still so important today. It is not only about one's ancient king. It is about every ruler, every empire, every proud human being who thinks their power will never end. Shelley reminds us that nothing worldly lasts forever. Wealth fades, monuments break, empires fall, time wins in the end. So the detailed summary of the poem is this. A traveler describes a ruined statue of the proud king Ozymandias standing in an empty desert. The broken face still shows the king's arrogance and cold authority. The words on the statue proudly announce his greatness, but the surrounding emptiness proves that his power has completely disappeared. Shelley uses this contrast to show that human pride, political power, and worldly glory are temporary, while time and decay overcome all these things.